Why is it so hard for you to believe? Is my physical existence any more improbable than your own? What about all that hoo-ha with the devil a while ago from that movie? Nobody had any problem believing that the devil took over and existed in a little girl. All she had to do was wet the rug, throw up some pea soup, and everybody believed. The devil you could believe, but not God. I worked in my own way. I don't get inside little children. They got enough problems alone. Also, I'm not about to go around to every person in the world and say, look, it's me. I want to talk to you. So I pick one man. One very good man. I told him, God lives. I live. He had trouble believing too, in the beginning. I understood. I'm not sure how this whole miracle business got started anyway. The idea that anything connected with me has to be a miracle. Personally, I'm sorry that it did. Makes the distance between us even greater. But if a miracle helps you believe that I am who I say I am, I'll give you one. A good one. Let me see. What's my most impressive miracle? Pick a card. So help me. Until 1977, who would have thought that God, creator of all creations, had a publicist problem? While his nemesis, Lord of the Dark, Mephistopheles in the Faustian legend, was an A-list star. And according to Andrew Gorsh, in a YouTube video that has received over 18,000 views on hidden messages in the Devil's Advocate, regardless of your religion, even for atheists, there is one name that everyone knows, and fans await every second for movies that have to deal something with the devil. And the unholy title alone will trigger a reaction just by the very mention. But just 2 decades ago, when Pew Research Center hosted a forum observing that 75% of Americans would identify themselves as a Christian, on a census questionnaire form at least, only 6% preferred a prayer that mentioned the name Jesus, while 53% preferred a moment of silence. That's an interesting way to say you're not ashamed of the gospel. 70% believed it was the responsibility of an employee to locate a workplace where they could practice their religious beliefs, but still held what Pew Research described as a reasonable expectation that most employers would be willing to make reasonable accommodations upon request. But at the same time, 55% of Americans believed that a resurgence of anti-Semitism was possible. 80% of Jewish Americans believed that they needed to remain on guard against it. And 60% of those in the Judaic faith tradition lived with a lingering fear, noting that it was a constant struggle to be caught being Jewish in America. 2 decades ago, only 24% of Americans would identify themselves as evangelical Christians, for whom at least 53% of them religion played the most important part of their lives. 68% of them believed that they, like the Jews, faced persecution, and 84% were convinced that Satan was the cause. Yet, while 61% believed it was their Christian duty to be the evangelist with the Great Commission to spread the word, like Leroy Hall, the Jehovah's Witness minister in our earlier video, who along with his partners believed it was their duty to go into that apartment building down in Richmond to deliver their messages themselves, like the Western Union man, and who were not asking for permission from the apartment management, half agreed that such proselytizing pressures would be inconsiderate to others. Even if 75% yet expected politicians to press the fight in the legislature and advance issues consistent with their Christian values. Even if 79% accepted that strategy might result in compromises inconsistent with their core beliefs. And consistent with this idea, a recent survey by the Barna Group found that 72% of people who will at least say that they are Christians believe that all people are basically good, sent as sheep amongst wolves, and perhaps having forgotten about that whole idea of sin and perhaps providing a reason not to press their views on a need to evangelize about an idea of salvation, which would not be necessary if the world is just a place filled with nice people. And most secularists tend to embrace Darwinian evolution and the idea of natural selection to propagate the dominant species, which is some science that perhaps evangelical Christians need to ponder, in addition to that associated with the novel coronavirus that closed their church. And this requires further development for legal analysis regarding these perceived healings. There is a great distinction between what one may perceive as discrimination personally and what is actionable in a courtroom. As noted in Meritor Savings Bank v. Benson by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1986, not all workplace conduct that may be described as harassment affects a term, condition, or privilege of employment within the meaning of Title VII. And here the court cites to a 1971 Fifth Circuit case, Rogers v. EEOC, which stated that mere utterance of an ethnic or racial epithet which engenders offensive feelings in an employee would not affect the conditions of employment to sufficiently significant degree to violate Title VII. However, the court stated that where a person is compelled to run a gauntlet of abuse in return for the privilege of being allowed to work and make a living can be as demeaning and disconcerting as the harshest of racial epithets. While, as noted by the High Court in Yanku v. Brunetti in 2019, government has an interest in not promoting certain kinds of speech, whether because such speech could be perceived as suggesting governmental favoritism or simply because the government does not wish to involve itself with that kind of speech. In discrimination law promoted for years by judicial activists, contrary to the wave of name change and monument removal actions of recent vintage, in Mason v. Adams County, recorder decided in the Southern District of Ohio in 2017, citing to the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Walt v. Selden in 1975, the court considered that under the third prong of the constitutional standing analysis, plaintiffs must show that a favorable judicial ruling will remove the harm, and concluded that this court does not have the power to redress the plaintiff's alleged injury by requiring the county recorders to redact all documents on file with racially restrictive language. Similarly, in JEB v. Alabama X-Rail TV, decided by the High Court in 1994, the court stated that it rejected allegations that used stereotypes, such as critical race theory, because they were the very stereotype the law condemns, citing two Powers v. Ohio, decided by the Supreme Court in 1991. Ask any lawyer, courts traditionally eschew speculative damages, and that is speculation, Your Honor. Certainly no one is being bashful about proselytizing about vaccines and the need to get everyone saved from a coronavirus. Perhaps that's more important to them than your faith is to you and your evangelical mission. But that was 2 decades ago, when only 40% of Americans preferred that a politician keep his religion to himself. And most Americans desired a greater role of the church, for the church, in the formation of policy. While today the situation has very much reversed. The diametric opposite. The Christian church, just in the last decade, experienced its sharpest decline. A public health crisis has closed the doors permanently on 20% of Christian churches. And in Virginia's 8th Congressional District, which has decided the outcome of statewide elections for over 2 decades, according to the Washington Post in November 2017, the incumbent, Don Beyer, who, according to the Friendly Atheist, has shown signs of frustration whenever government officials use God to promote bad policy or bad ideas or twisted the Bible to make a bad point. I think he has a problem with bad things coming out of religion. Decided, after receiving 75% of the vote in the 2020 election, the election year that he had called the election of his lifetime, finally accepted the invitation of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus, which described itself as just a group of lawmakers dedicated to promoting reason-based policy. Not an atheist club, of course. Keeping church and state separate, opposing discrimination against non-religious people, against non-religious people and championing freedom of thought around the world, because if you are a Christian, you obviously have no thoughts, while expressing the aspiration that the membership continues growing, making the caucus more influential, while the stigma of being an atheist or being associated with non-religiosity decreases around the world, which does not appear to be an organization that finds itself inconsiderate to present their views to others, unlike you and your loving Christian ideas. And today, 5% of employees claiming a religious exemption from the vaccines mandate in Arkansas are being presented, dare say provoked and pressed, with a religious test to educate them and test their sincerity by a company, the Conway Regional Health System, their employer, which does not feel in any way inconsiderate about presenting this test and reminding their employees that they are in an at-will employment agreement, free upon reasonable notice to terminate that relationship at any time for any reason. Strictly business, and you are sent as sheep among wolves. But in 1977, the film Oh God, with George Burns and John Denver, paid homage to the 1973 thriller based upon the 1971 William Peter Blatty novel, The Exorcist, which was inspired by the true life story of an exorcism in 1949 of Roby Mannheim, witnessed by 48 people, including 9 Jesuit priests, and recorded by one priest, Raymond Bishop. But in the film, 12-year-old Reagan McNeil has a posh Georgetown address. Her mother is a movie star who is not particularly religious and prefers to keep her daughter away from such foolish ideas, but finds herself calling on Father Karras at Georgetown University, who had himself dismissed the ideas of his church on exorcism, at least, having accepted the scientific explanations of such phenomenon by modern psychology and science. Chris McNeil, famous movie star, played by Ellen Burstyn, is so ashamed of religion that she even dons a mask when she goes to meet with Father Karras, who is also in a mask, not in uniform, when she goes to see him. So this narrative departs the traditional Faustian legend, where there is some person seduced into a deal by their own desires for fame and glory and riches, blinded to the dangers of this deal, and quite a few discussions in various forums have actually pondered the questions as to why Pazuzu, or the devil, chose to go to a 12-year-old, Reagan McNeil, for a demonic possession that still continues to inspire generations of moviegoers willing to spend 93 minutes in a movie theater and engage in hours of discussion thereafter, but yet a little disturbed about the thought of spending even 1 hour in a worship service with perhaps a half-hour homily on religion. But at the very beginning of The Exorcist, as you may recall, during a scene in Iraq, Father Merrin, who provides the famed silhouette of the exorcist's dark shadow in the beginning, and loses his life in the classic dualistic world battle between good and evil, wanders through ruins and discovers the statue of Pazuzu, who apparently released his spirit upon the world and has found his way somehow to Reagan McNeil, thousands of miles away, for them to meet again, which provides a convenient segue to the case on religious oaths that had been delivered by Justice Black for the United States Supreme Court in 1961, because that case returned again today. As one might expect, it was a case brought by an atheist, imagine that, who had applied for a commission in the state of Maryland to become a notary republic. This is not, big job. He gets $5 to put his signature on a document and a stamp. A state with a history of religious tolerance, having been founded by Roman Catholics fleeing persecution in Europe, but which had nonetheless required all public officers to consent to a religious test to affirm their belief in God. And so Roy Tarasco, again, this is not, Warren Buffett, went to court to bring suit, but like Mujahid Bahri, did not just walk into court by himself, and rather retained a rather pricey conservative Jewish attorney, Leo Pfeffer. Conservative Jewish, though. And Lawrence Spicer, who were not just random names selected from the Yellow Pages. nor nobody ambulance chasers in that profession that Al Pacino's John Milton and The Devil's Advocate had described as the ministry for the devil. FEFA had been celebrated by such organizations as the American Humanist Association, which had recently brought its challenge to the Brandenburg Cross Monument to veterans of World War I. Spicer was celebrated by he was a celebrated First Amendment attorney who 3 years before in Spicer v. Randall had gained this distinction as the first and only person to have ever successfully argued pro se a case before the United States Supreme Court and prevail in a First Amendment case. These are not nobodies, but they found him. Do you think they're looking for a notary and found this guy? Really? And regardless of the pretext from Conway Regional Health System that their directive to only 5% of their employees who have requested a religious exemption to the vaccine mandates as being only to educate their employees and to assess their sincerity, in Tarasco v. Watkins, the Supreme Court articulated a rule expressly requested by an atheist who had been seeking to enjoy the same religious liberties in Maryland as those who had come to escape their persecution in Europe, stating, we repeat, and again reaffirm that neither a state nor the federal government can constitutionally force a person to profess a belief or disbelief in any religion. Neither can constitutionally pass laws or impose requirements which aid all religions as against non-believers, and neither can aid those religions based on a belief in the existence of God as against those religions founded on different beliefs. And in Tarasco v. Watkins in 1961, in a case brought by an atheist, Justice Black concluded this Maryland religious test for public office unconstitutionally invades the appellant's freedom of belief and religion and therefore cannot be enforced against him. But now that the battle is won, with the aid of a conservative Jewish attorney that presented the appearance of a rule that could be applicable to all for those who just look at appearances, Father Merritt and Father Karras now find themselves in Arkansas in a return of the Pazuzu spirit that had revealed itself years ago, with a religious test and oath to be applied against those who profess faith and religion. Those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it, as George Santayana once said, but for over years, schools and libraries have been closed, along with churches, providing a convenient opportunity to forget. But until, lest I forget, get 70. But until next time, recall that as Paul writes in his epistle to the early church of Ephesus, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. To those in faith, behold, for you are sent forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And I charge thee therefore in season and out of season, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. For a time has come when they will not endure sound doctrine, and they do not. But after their own lust, they heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears. And they turn away their ears from the truth and are turned unto fables, that they still at least profess to believe. But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, and make full proof of thy ministry. Because you know, when you are a Robert Cardew or a Leroy Hall, the best law firm in the world doesn't just show up at your door to help you. Live long and prosper, Star Voyagers. This briefing is unclassified. As you were, my name is Major Mike Webb, and by God, I am running for Arlington Public School Board. At least in pretext. Let's keep Mike Webb away from our schools. Honest. Carry on. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.
I used to be a Power Ranger in a former life.
Thunk, I could have had a vaccine. Say goodnight, Gracie. So help me.